On 16 January 2017, Ukraine filed a case in the International Court of Justice to hold the Russian Federation accountable for acts of terrorism and discrimination in the course of its aggression against Ukraine. The case has been filed under the International Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism of 9 December 1999 and the International Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination of 21 December 1965. Ukraine alleges that the Russian Federation is violating the Terrorism Financing Convention by supplying weapons and providing other forms of assistance to illegal armed groups operating on Ukrainian territory. The Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination by discriminating non-Russian communities living in the occupied Crimean Peninsula, including in particular the ethnic Ukrainians and Tatars. The hearing on provisional measures requested by Ukraine lasted from 6 March 2017 to 9 March this year. Russia planned military aggression against Ukraine in advance. Victory of the Revolution of Dignity was only a convenient pretext. Russia launched its well-planned armed aggression against Ukraine on 20 February 2014 with the military operation of its armed forces on seizing a part of the Ukrainian territory, Crimean Peninsula. This date is not even denied by the Russian Ministry of Defense, as it is indicated on the medal for the return of Crimea. In fact, only the next day, Viktor Yanukovych fled from Kiev, and it was already 22 February 2014 that the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine adopted the resolution on the dissociation of the President of Ukraine from fulfillment of constitutional powers and appointment of earlier presidential elections in Ukraine, used by Russia as a pretext for accusations of the alleged unconstitutional coup in Ukraine. Illegal occupation of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol was just the first Russian step aimed at undermining independence and sovereignty of Ukraine. The Kremlin has always been firmly convinced that Russia will never become a world leader without control over Ukraine. Meanwhile, a democratic and prosperous Ukrainian is a threat to the current authoritarian rule in Russia. That is why the next step of the Russian aggression was an attempt to destabilize the situation in the eastern and southern regions of Ukraine in order to form a quasi-state Novorossiya. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced this plan as a dialogue with the Russians TV program on the first channel on 17 April 2014. We succeed to disrupt the full implementation of his plans, but Russian regular troops and its proxies occupied certain areas of Donetsk and Lugansk regions of Ukraine. Military aggression is just one element of Russian hybrid war against Ukraine. Other elements encompass propaganda based on lies and falsifications, trade and economic pressure, energy blockade, terror and intimidation of Ukrainian citizens, cyber attacks, a strong denial of the very fact of war against Ukraine despite large scope of irrefutable evidence, use of pro-Russian forces and satellite states in its own interest, blaming the other side for its own crimes. On 27 March 2014, the UN General Assembly adopted the resolution named Territorial Integrity of Ukraine, which confirmed the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine and the absence of any legal basis to change the status of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. The same was confirmed by the United Nations General Assembly resolution named Situation of Human Rights in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, Ukraine, of 19 December 2016. The resolution defines Russia as an occupying power and places all the responsibility for human rights violation in Crimea upon Moscow. Political and economic sanctions are the most effective tool of pressure on the aggressor state. They highly reduced the possibility of a large-scale invasion and forced Russia to sit at the negotiating table, in particular within the trilateral contact group. Ukraine and Russia are parties to the conflict. The OSCE is a mediator. And Normandy quoted, Ukraine and Russia are parties to the conflict. France and Germany are mediators. A decision to ease or lift the sanctions will encourage a new wave of Russian military aggression. Russian aggression has led to horrible humanitarian impacts. About 10,000 people killed and up to 23,000 wounded. 298 passengers of MH17 flight, including 80 children, killed as a result of terrorist attack on 17 July 2014, when the Malaysian Airlines plane was shot down by the Russian serviceman from Buk missile system that had been transferred to the occupied territory of Donbass from the Russian Federation. About 2 million residents of Crimea and Donbass are now internally displaced persons after being forced to leave their homes. Equipment of main industrial facilities of Donbass was dismantled and transported to the territory of Russia. Mines are flooded, and this can cause ecological disaster. Russian authorities do not allow access of experts for analyzing the threats and thus make the situation worse. The Minsk agreements are a basis for political resolution of the conflict in Donbass. They have been violated by the Russian Federation on a regular basis. By launching military aggression against Ukraine, Russia violated fundamental norms and principles of international law, bilateral and multilateral agreements. Resorting to the military aggression against Ukraine, Russia violated fundamental norms and principles of international law, mentioned in particular in United Nations Charter, Helsinki Final Act, United Nations General Assembly Resolution Definition of Aggression, Russia had also violated a number of bilateral and multilateral agreements, namely Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances related to the Ukraine's accession to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Agreement on Friendship, Cooperation and Partnership between Ukraine and the Russian Federation, Agreement between Ukraine and the Russian Federation on the Ukrainian-Russian state border, Agreement between Ukraine and the Russian Federation on the status and conditions of Russian Black Sea Fleet in Ukraine. Russia continues to supply weapons, ammunition, and fuel to the occupied territory through the uncontrolled section of the Ukrainian-Russian state border in order to strengthen the units of its regular troops deployed in Donbass, as well as the illegal armed formations it backs. Part of the Ukrainian-Russian border is uncontrolled, which is why Russia regular troops and mercenaries continue to arrive to Donbass from Russia. Russian mercenaries are qualified as foreign terrorist fighters in accordance with resolution of United Nations Security Council of 24 September 2014. They constitute significant part of Russia-formed army corpses, and command chain consists of Russian officers and generals. The number of regular Russian troops in Donbass is around 30,000. Russia's aggressive policy targets not only Ukraine. Russia violated territorial integrity of Moldova and Georgia, announced its territory claims and the willingness to protect Russian-speaking population in the Baltic states. Russia supports Eurosceptic and radical movements in Europe. It was registered that Russian special services interfered in the electoral campaign during the US presidential election in 2016, carried out cyber attacks against OSCE, Germany and France. Russia's brutal military campaign in Syria has resulted in increased wave of refugees to Europe. There are many evidence of close relations between Russian special services and terrorist organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Political and economic sanctions were imposed on Russia in response to its aggression against Ukraine. Therefore, stopping Russian military aggression against Ukraine and the reinstatement of Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity may be the only reason of their conciliation. Otherwise, Russia will continue its aggression, extending it to other states in the region. All the facts mentioned are the clear evidence of Russian aggression in Ukraine. Yet, Ukrainian people are showing the adamant resistance to this aggression and will do all possible to restore their sovereignty and territorial integrity.